Hi everyone. I got another video that one of my subscribers sent to me. It's pretty hard to watch, but it's really interesting, and it really just tells us kind of how white people invented racism. And so I'm going to play it for you guys. Hopefully everything will play properly. So
19th and 18th centuries. The vile and brutish parts of mankind. The marks of an alien race. Those were how the gentleman class described whites, poor whites to be exact, from Europe, many of whom were duped by a con game, promised an all-expense-paid trip to the New World, in return for years of free labor on the other side. Then there were those sentenced to work for 5 to 7 years of forced labor. In the 1700s alone, over 50,000 documented white men and women were shipped to the colonies and auctioned off as labor for crimes from petty theft to trespassing or pickpocketing.
So pay a lot of attention to that first part when they're explaining white slavery, because you'll have a lot of white people screaming victims and that they're victims of slavery and that they were the first slaves. So you'll notice the difference is they were slaves for committing crimes and atrocities in Europe. So they were brought here to work off crimes. And even they were all given, you know, you're going to work for 5 years, you're going to work for 10 years. It was an actual jail sentence. They were not actual slaves in the sense of the Africans that were stolen from their land.
A slave was considered unfortunate, not inferior. To become a slave in the ancient world was not based on skin color, but the result of being on the losing side in a war. White indentured servants 400 years ago were seen as more or less the same as African slaves. They also made easy alliances, raging against greed, unfair taxes, oppressive land use regulations, and in the 1670s, one of those alliances nearly burned Jamestown to the ground. And the last to
So this part, this is something that we're always talking about. I know my sister talks about it a lot, that white people, when they want something, they will band together and fight for it. And so they were rebelling and burning stuff down. And this is where they decided to create racism right here. This is when they started. When they saw that white people were fighting and trying to get what they want, that's when they said, okay, well, here, let's make you over black people. Let's put you over black people.
Surrender were 100 men, 80 black and 20 white. And a law enforcement system was created to give whites slightly more privileges and force a separation in their contact with blacks. This three-tiered caste system, blacks on the bottom, poor whites a notch above, now treated more favorably, made them feel as though one day they might improve their status if they just worked hard enough. Maybe some did, but most did not, especially as the life expectancy was only 35. As all rights and freedoms were taken from Africans, this new racial caste system protected the wealthy landowners, who in the South would soon become known as the masters. And if you're interested in reading more about this, there's a page-turning thriller, not exaggerating, called The People's History of the United States, which you can download as an audiobook to support this series. The creation of that three-tiered caste system is the moment the modern institution of racial slavery is born, which would brutalize, divide, and crush the spirits of black men, women, and children for the next 200 years, and give many poor whites the idea that though their lives might be miserable, at least they weren't black. Until 1863. And as Michelle Alexander...
And so we really need to like, that picture was really, really hard to see. I don't usually watch any kind of slavery movies because I don't like seeing images like that. But just to go back a little bit, the black people were also fighting. They were all fighting, but the fact that they were fighting together, these richer white people said, oh, okay, this is not going to work. So how can we go in and again and divide these people in a way that they can keep each other in check, so that if we give them this little inkling that you're better than these people because you're white, you know, you're kind of like us. We're white and you're white, so you're closer to us than you are them. It's nasty. So when we say that white people created racism, here's proof.
Miranda writes in The New Jim Crow, former slaves had a brief moment in the sun before they returned to a state akin to slavery or worse. The unprecedented economic might of the new United States, built on the backs of an enormous free slave labor force, would arguably be the single greatest factor contributing to what would soon become the world's largest modern superpower. And in gratitude,
and this free slave labor that he's talking about right now does not include any white people. This is only black people. The white people that were slaves were only slaves for a certain amount of time, which is like 5 or 10 years. They were working off a prison sentence. So don't let white people sit there and tell you that they were slaves too and that their families were also the people that built this country, because they were not. They were indentured servants, and they were working off a prison sentence because they were violent and disgusting and terrorists before they stepped foot on American soil.
Instead of helping freed slaves find homes, reunite with families, or help anyone, at the very least, heal from a 300-year-old trauma, they were largely neglected by the North, faced rampant disease, outbreaks of smallpox, cholera, many starved to death, and for the next 100 years, this thing called Jim Crow just took over for slavery.
No, and what he's failing to also add into this, they also in the South opened up concentration camps in which a lot of these black people were put in, and he will talk about when they were put in these concentration camps, and I think it's called I can't remember what it's called. If anyone remembers what the black concentration camps in the South were called, you guys can put those in the comments so that people can look those up. But they were put in the concentration camps, and they were spreading diseases. They gave them smallpox to make sure that a lot of them died.
Enforced by government, courts, and law officers, forcing a continuation of an already well-established racial caste system on every aspect of American life. Ministers said whites were the chosen people, blacks cursed to be servants. God supported racial segregation, craniologists, eugenicists.
So you see how your religion works to keep black people down. These were your pastors, your preachers, your church owners that are telling these other people that you are ordained to kill black people. So you need to think about that when you're getting on your knees and you're praying to this white Jesus and you're subscribing to this white religion. When we're baptizing our children into this religion, you're promising your child's very soul to a white Jesus. That's what you need to realize. This is really helping white supremacy keep black people in our place.
Phrenologists and social Darwinists at every educational level reinforced the belief that blacks were in every way inferior to whites. Massive social disadvantages, compounded by predatory lending and housing markets, and legally regulating blacks into ghettos, discriminatory bank lending practices, severe job discrimination, not to mention the lynchings, all continued until the 1960s.
Not until the 1960s. This is continuing today. So they literally just found a black teenager hanging from a tree like a week ago. So don't let him sit there and tell you that this is something that ended 50 years ago. This is stuff that continues as of today.
We're only talking 50 years ago. We finally have the Civil Rights Act, black nationalism, and black power, black pride. For the first time, a public promise of opportunity after 3 centuries of the opposite. Communities getting to police their own streets, but the black pride forces are soon struck down by the law and order movement. And what takes the place of what was once called Jim Crow? The invention of the largest prison industry in the world, in the form of new laws, tougher laws, more laws, longer sentences, mandatory minimums, more prisons, more police, and the barbaric war on drugs, which should be called the war on people, where blacks are far more likely to be arrested for selling and possessing drugs.
So it should be called the war on black people, not just people, but black people.
And whites, even though whites use drugs at the same rate and are actually more likely to sell drugs. Blacks who've committed the exact same crimes as whites are more likely to be arrested, prosecuted, more likely to have longer prison sentences. Families deprived of breadwinners and once.
So just to backtrack just a little, just in case any white people are watching this, so they need to hear this information, that white people use drugs more than black people, and white people sell more drugs than black people. Only black people get prosecuted and they go to jail for it.
Again, deprived of the right to vote. Generations sentenced to a revolving door in and out of a prison system so unstoppable that 1 out of 3 black men born today can expect to go to prison in their lifetime. And so despite the existence of so many notable, heroic black, brown, and white cops saving lives and rescuing victims from unimaginable horrors across the country,
you're not going to see any one white cop being heroic or saving anyone. And it's funny that he's trying to point this out and say that there's, you know, all these good white cops out there, but he couldn't find any, and I can't find any. So
country, righteous lawyers, wise judges, honest legislators doing great things that cannot and should never be overlooked. Overall, Black America has never.
And if we had all these honest legislators, the laws wouldn't be how they are. There would not be mass incarceration. There would not be black people being pushed into poor neighborhoods. There would not be this uneven funding of schools and healthcare. So the whole aspect of these great legislators, they do not exist.
Seen a substantive break in law enforcement service to larger forces ever on the wrong side of history. Policing for petty regulatory violations like failure to use a turn signal or lacking a front license plate. And so here we are today. 30% of America are minorities, but represent 60% of the prison population. Over 1 million men and women. And so the majority of Black America, 70%, understandably have little trust in law enforcement and criminal justice system.
Because you shouldn't trust them. And you need to realize that this prison system is modern day slavery. It is nothing less than that. They are rounding up black people, majority of them black men, putting them in these prisons to work jobs where they're paying them 10 cents an hour. So realize that this is modern day prison, or this prison is modern day slavery, and it is disgusting. And I like, it's sickening when I hear white people sit there and say, oh, they're in prison because they committed crimes, when it's a fact that majority of the people that are in prison that are being falsely accused, and that are actually, it is shown that they're falsely accused by DNA. Majority of those people are black men. So for that whole argument that they're in there for committing crimes, no, majority of them are not in there for committing crimes. And I can tell you where all the criminals are. They're up sitting in these Fortune 500 companies. Those are your criminals. Those are the people that should be in prison. And those are, and your legislators and your congressmen and your policemen, those are your criminals. And those are white men.
But don't be fooled. This prison industrial complex has not only swept up Black America, but all people of limited means, hunting minorities and the poor at rates higher than any other on the planet. This thing grew bigger than anyone could have imagined. It's militarized and increased in scope and aggression, and as racist as it clearly is, even if we took all the minorities out of the equation, leaving only the white majority, we would still be over-incarcerated. We would still have vile police brutality. We would still have a criminal justice system desperately in need of reform. So just like the days of early,
you would continue to have extreme crime, because white on white crime is an epidemic. White people will attack anyone. If they don't have black people to murder, if they don't have Mexicans to murder, if they don't have any other race to murder, they will murder each other. And that's proven. That's why they came out of Europe in the first place, because they couldn't get along with each other. So they're trying to make you feel like you're the criminal and something's wrong with black people. And I just don't understand why, you know, their black people are so uneducated and so irresponsible, when they are the biggest criminals. They are the most irresponsible. They're trying to like deflect everything that they are onto black people, and we need to stop owning it. We don't have to take responsibility for it. We don't need to take hold of their degeneracy. That's not us. And we need to realize that that's not us. And we need to tell our children that that's not who they are. Because I tell you, when these schools, when they're teaching your kids on Black History Month, they're teaching your kids inferiority. They're teaching your kids that they're slaves, that they're criminals, that they're monsters. And oh, just these little few special ones weren't that. And if you just aim to be like Martin Luther King, then you won't be a degenerate like the rest of the Black community. That's what they're teaching our kids. We really need to open our eyes and take heed and take notice of everything that's going on and everything that has gone on. They're telling us since Jim Crow ended 50 years ago that everything ended. All of that stuff that was happening during Jim Crow is happening today. And we need to realize that and open up our eyes.
Slavery. Today, we still have a three-tiered system. With notable exceptions, slightly more than half of Black Americans graduate from high school, compared to 3/4 of white Americans. And Black males are twice as likely to be unemployed.
But let's say why. Because instead of them being able to finish high school, you have these police targeting them and putting them in jail. Even right here today in Seattle, they want to open up a youth prison. And people aren't looking at the fact that first they're like, oh, you know, youth homelessness is at an all-time high. And then, oh, let's open up youth prisons so we can put all these minority kids that are already having a bad time and they don't have a home to live in. Let's now put them in prison so they're not graduating from high school.
As white males. Moving on to the second tier, we have poor whites, treated the second worst as a whole. With many more notable exceptions, so many you think it wasn't the case, white America is also in very bad shape. The real poverty rate for the US as a whole is staggeringly close to 50%. We have a myth of social mobility that is one of the worst in the industrialized world due to decades of disinvestment from communities sending cheap labor overseas, leaving depressed, isolated local economies with no jobs, a dwindling tax base, and nothing to attract business.
You see these areas where they did this at. Detroit, Chicago, LA. This is purposeful. I don't want you guys to think that any of this stuff is accidental. This is a plan. White supremacy is a planned out structure, and you have to know that, and you have to see that, and we need to start acting accordingly to this. We need to get as much knowledge and then act according. This is not an accident that these neighborhoods don't have funding. It's not an accident that these areas are extremely segregated. Jim Crow is alive and well today, guys, really.
Or new residents. And why is this? As the great journalist Emily Cleet says, we should never say the word poverty without the words inequality and injustice being far behind. People become poor, not by personal failing, but because the system.
And I'm just going to say, go back, because they showed Seattle, which is where I live, and very segregated. Seattle it's supposed to be one of the most liberal, one of the most progressive places, and it is very segregated and very racist. The only difference is you get the passive aggressive, these white people that will smile in your face and try to fake be nice to you while they're screwing you and putting you in the ghetto. As far as pushing Black people as far south of Seattle as they can possibly push you out, all the while smiling in your face. You need to see right past that. They all have the same mentality. I don't care if they're smiling in your face, because they're backstabbers, and you have to know that. Just please know that. We need to start seeing past that shiny veneer that they will try to push out there.
Is engineered to push them down and keep them down. Yet despite numerous horrific incidents of police brutality and criminal injustice against whites, the beating of a homeless man or a horse thief to near death or to death, or the 1 million whites in prison, unprecedented in our nation's history, the majority of whites today, 57%, still have quite a lot, or a great deal of confidence in police, and a majority think the justice system is fair. The poor whites and victims of criminal injustice and inequality are spread out across the country and heavily divided by culture and politics.
We gotta throw some poor white people, and we're victims too. I knew this was coming. It's always they're victims too. There's 1 million white people in prison. There's way more white people in America than there are minorities, and yet there are way more black people in prison than there are white. So we can cry a little tear for white people if you guys want to. I'm not going to. I don't feel bad for them. They made this structure. They maintain this structure. They enjoy this structure. Let's go all the way back to when they made those white slaves over the black slaves. They still have that same mentality. I don't care. At least I'm white, which makes me better than black. So there'll always be white people. Those poor white people are still inflicting the same damage on the black community as these non-poor are as the other white people. So don't even look at this and shed a little tear for them. They're the same. It's their structure. If they had a big problem with it, they would tear down the structure, but they're not tearing down the structure because they have that same mentality that we're slaves, but you know, our time is limited and at least we're not black. They still have that same mentality. So do not feel sorry for them. They are not victims.
So-called liberal or conservative news media is owned by 6 mega media companies that control 90% of our information. Those companies are owned by the very rich. According to Forbes,
and of course he's not going to say the very white. They're owned by white people.
The 400 wealthiest Americans today have more money than the poorer half of the entire population of the United States. While less than 4% of our entire country are millionaires, they make up over half the members of Congress. Who do you think millionaires represent? The elite who run the country in a different revolving door of economic royalty have demonstrated certainly that they are above prosecution. So with a news media that mostly reports only on the black outrage of police brutality, which is and has been at a boiling point for the last 300 years, the white majority is confused. They make all kinds of assumptions, and the white minority, who are aware of the horrors of the criminal and justice system, but unaware of the history of black America, feel themselves being lumped in with the elites.
Sorry, not true. Those majority of the white people, every white person in America has a duty to help tear down this white supremacist system, and they refuse to do that. They won't do it because they benefit from it. So I don't care if he sits there and try to make it seem like, oh, they just don't understand what's going on. They understand what's going on. They know what's going on, and they want it to stay the way it is because they still are benefiting from white supremacy. Victims. They know exactly what's going on. This is
When they scream at Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson and call them race baiters, they're right to scream, but they're screaming at the wrong faces. The media is terrified to let the mass of Americans know the truth about our 3-tiered caste system alive and well and keeping us divided.
Thank you. Alive and well. It is alive and well. And the white people call black people race baiters if you say something about them killing an unarmed black child. But we're supposed to think, oh, those are just confused white people. No, they're not. They're racist, white supremacist terrorists, just like all the other ones. The rich ones, the poor ones, the in-betweens. It does not matter. If they were not, we would not be living in a white supremacist system. It is not those elites that are running the system. It is the in-betweens, those white people that you go to work with, the white people that live next door to you, the white person that you interview for a job, the white security guard that's following you in the store. Those are the people that perpetuate this white supremacist system. They are not victims. They are making the system. They are maintaining the system. They are part of the system, the same system. Do not let them try to separate themselves because they have less money. They are the exact same.
Why do I need to identify with those ancestors before me that committed genocide and not only enslaved, but brutalized the people who in chains and in struggle for civil rights created and inspired some of the greatest art, music, culture, writing, ideas, invention, and humanity the world has ever seen? I identify with being part of that struggle. I don't need to be proud of my blood because the same color red gives life to us all. I don't need to be proud of the color of my skin because I was never told I needed to be.
Now he's going to try to sit there and give you we're all the same speech. We're not all the same. We don't have the ability to do the demonic stuff that they have done. We don't have that in us. It's not in our blood. They lack empathy. They lack humanity. We're not the same. So I'm going to let it play just so you guys can see what he says. But do not ever fall for that, oh, we're all red. we all bleed red. It doesn't matter. We do all bleed red. But you know what? Black people are bleeding a hell of a lot more than white people are. And we're bleeding because of white people.
Ashamed of it. True shame is only for those who have hate in their hearts, and that can be healed. I don't need to be proud of my religion because all the great religions warn us against pride. I am privileged to be a white, straight male in a society that favors those traits for which I had nothing to do with. Favors I might not even know I had. I grew up poor.
He grew up with white privilege just like all the other white men, okay, and all the other white people. Not only did he have white privilege, but he had white male privilege. And now he's going to sit here and try to make you feel sorry for him.
There were a few years I was homeless, but I did not grow up black, and I was blessed in my childhood to see the difference. To paraphrase Van Jones, even in a hoodie, I look less like Trayvon than I do like Mark Zuckerberg. So along the way, in forming my identity as a human being, I choose to identify with all of humanity in a struggle for harmony. You are my ally, and I am yours. I don't need to be better than someone else to feel good about myself. I need to feel the same. I acknowledge racism as existing and alive as it ever was, and in doing so, I eliminate any invented wall between us. When we ally ourselves with a movement that's been asking to just acknowledge for 4 odd centuries how overdue it is to just say 3 words, Black Lives Matter. Then united, we are a power that will shake the masters to their core. Yes, I say masters of the global economy that exploits not only our own nation, but the entire planet.
The thing is, we should be able to say Black Lives Matter. But we can't say Black Lives Matter, because if we say Black Lives Matter, then white people want to say all lives matter. Another way to completely just like dishonor black people and to say your life your life doesn't matter. If you can't even say that. But all these white people are not part of the problem. They're not white supremacists. They're just, victims of a system that they have nothing to do with. But please don't say Black Lives Matter, because that offends me. We need to say all lives matter. All people aren't getting shot in the street. All people aren't getting lynched up in trees. Black people are.
Masters of the commercial news, the military-industrial complex, prison complex, the overwhelming majority of the government, the masters corrupted by the influence too much power has on all human beings. For injustice and inequality are one and the same. Black, brown, white, sisters, brothers. The class struggle unites us all, as it always has. And race baiters, you are exposed.
Now, I want to go ahead and say, we are not the same. It's nice that you guys can download these books, though, these free audibles. These are nice. And for those who don't like to just sit there and read these, it's an audible, so it kind of reads the book for you. I don't enjoy audibles because I need to see the words and be able to go back and forth. But a lot of people, that's, if you have not read the new Jim Crow, then you should definitely read that. I totally disagree with this guy on the whole race baiter thing, because majority of the stuff that is happening is based on race. And I'm a little bit confused on even with the Jim Crow thing, because that's all about race. Everything has been, since they created racism, where he just showed you when they first got to Europe, they created racism. They made it about race 400 years ago. Well, longer than 400 years ago. So it's like almost 700 years. But so almost 700 years ago, they made it about race. And it's been about race, and it's still about race. And it's about race every day. When a black person is pulled over, it's about race. When they're stopped on the streets, it's about race. When you're hung in the trees, it's about race. When you're going to prison, it's about race. When you go apply for a job, it's about race. When you apply for housing, it's about race. When you wake up in the morning, it's about race. It's always about race. And that's the thing about it. They want to sit there and distract black people and get you confused and tell you it's not about race, it's about the elite. It's about race. When it's not about race, you'll see white people trying to break down this unfair, unjust system of white supremacy. They will try to end this white supremacist terrorism, that it's a global epidemic. They would be trying to do something to end that. But instead, they want to sit there and distract you again and sit there and tell you, oh, it's not about race. We're all one. We're all one. Just, you know, be fine with us killing your black children and your black men and your black women. Be fine with us finding your family members hung from trees. Just be okay with that. It's not because they're black. It's because they're poor like us. Give me a break. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about this this video. It's, I don't know, yeah, I'm just, right now I don't watch this stuff, so it's kind of, you know, it's hitting me kind of hard. I don't like seeing stuff like that. It gives me this anger that I don't, you know, I can't really do anything with right now. I'm actually holding my baby niece that's a year old, so I don't know, but let me know what you guys think about this. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Share this video. I really think this was a really good video, even though I disagree with a lot of stuff that's said in it. I think it was very informative. So if you guys can share this, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys on the next video.